much of that introduction because I didn't take the meeting off of mute. Sorry, Julie, can you hear us now?
Sorry, I can now. Yes, that's a big relief. I was having a little mini panic there. So thank you. I can hear you all now. Yes. Okay, hopefully.
I've done the introduction, Julie. It's over to you now to run us through the strategy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today, but I am here to present virtually. This is the second HRA asset management strategy. Whilst it's not a statutory duty for stockholding authorities to have a strategy in place, it is best practice to have one, providing a clear focus on long-term investment plans and setting out the key strategic principles for managing the council's housing assets. The strategy's focus and purpose is to ensure that the council makes best use of its housing stock to meet current and future housing need. Over the last couple of years, the housing sector has faced three big national asset management changes, making council homes and housing buildings safe and compliant post-Grenfell safety guidance, reducing carbon emissions within council housing stock through retrofit programmes, and increasing the supply of high quality, affordable council homes that are also carbon neutral across differing tenures to meet local housing need across the whole of the district. The draft HRA asset management strategy brought to committee today for direction and debate outlines the high-level strategic actions that are required in order to ensure that the council's housing management objectives are achieved. A substantial and detailed operational document covering research, policy and evidence collecting underpins the work of the strategy and identifies the strategic objectives. The overall strategic outcomes of the asset management strategy is to achieve an increase in supply of homes, that all homes are energy efficient and affordable to run, a housing stock that meets the current and future needs for client groups, all homes comply with the Decent Home Standards, and that tenants feel safe in their homes and know how to raise concerns. The recommendations that Cabinet are asked to consider when adopting the HRA Asset Management Strategy report is to adopt the updated HRA management strategy, which is included as Appendix 1 to this report, approve the proposed criteria for disposals and acquisitions of council dwellings as set out in the Cabinet report in sections 16, 17 and 18, approve the proposed fund to the provision of fire door sets to leaseholder properties in the medium rise flats at Winnell. And to support discussion and to conclude my hopefully short introduction on the report is to provide a short narrative around recommendations 2 and 3, starting with 2, the acquisitions and disposals criteria. Opportunities to acquire assets are often in the form of buybacks of right to buy properties offered back to the council in the first instance as part of the discount rules. And opportunities to purchase land to support future development is another example of acquiring assets, both provided for within the HRA capital programme. Moving on to disposals, the removal of the HRA cap in 2018 means the original reasons for developing a programme of asset disposal is no longer a major factor of the strategy objectives, as housing programmes can be fully funded by prudential borrowing and effective future rental income. As such, disposals are now only considered in exceptional circumstances. However, there may be some opportunities where disposals could be still considered to ensure that the council continues to make good use of its housing assets and ensure council homes meet the Decent Home Standards. Moving on to recommendation 3, the proposal to fund provision of fire doors to leaseholders. Ensuring council homes are well maintained and comply with safety standard has always been a key priority for the council. A programme to upgrade the existing entrance doors to flats and masonettes is already underway for council tenants, but the programme does not at this stage include upgrades for leaseholders. This is because leaseholders own their front doors to their property and as such will have a responsibility to ensure that their front door is fire compliant. However, it is proposed to offer leaseholders at the higher risk properties, specifically the 4 medium rise blocks at Winnell, a fire replacement fire rated door. This enhanced fire safety offer by the council will ensure the safety of all residents, knowing that fire safety obligations have been met within the medium-rise blocks at Winnell, providing peace of mind for all. The approach, as mentioned, is designed to provide additional fire protection for tenants and responds to specific concerns raised by tenants regarding overall safety due to the standard of which other residents maintain their leasehold properties. I hope this has provided you with a short introduction to the paper to allow plenty of time for discussion. I know that members have already provided feedback to us, and that's really appreciated. Thank you. And those amendments will be taken forward into the strategy and report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. So you want to get into questions, and I'm sure there are quite a few. Still like Mr. Chair, do you want to say anything now? Would you like us to go through the questions? Do you have questions yourselves that you'd like to raise? Or would you like to make comments at the end when we get into debate?
I think we'd like to take comments at the end. So I haven't got any questions. I was aware the other day. That's
not at this stage, thanks.
I'll come back to you when we go into debate. All right, fine. I myself had a question or two just to kick off, and specifically on one of the items that's on you're asking for recommendations on. Just wondering on the fire door question, if leaseholders choose not to take up our offer, are we expecting them to make their own arrangements on this, Julie? I mean, if they don't wish to make the improvements or use our scheme, what encouragements can we offer to ensure that they are not compromising the safety standards in the flats?
Of course, following the Grenfell reports and recommendations are obviously still coming forward now, there will be an obligation on a leaseholder to provide the council with confirmation that they have a fire compliant door. So they will have to do it at some stage. And one of the benefits, which I didn't mention actually, around replacing the fire doors is around the fact that we would be offering them an updated, more sellable lease. So we're hoping that will hook people in as well. But there is inevitably always leaseholder that may not wish to take up this offer. But as I say, they will have an obligation to. So we will be able to take enforcement action if their door isn't safe and compliant.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Do I have any more questions on the fire doors before we move on? Is it about fire doors, Councillor Isaacs? Over to you.
Thank you. Can I just ask if we've got anybody else outside of Winchester that qualifies for this scheme, or is it just central Winchester identified to those Winnell flats only? Thank you.
At the moment, we're only looking at the high risk properties, and in Winchester, we're very fortunate we only have medium rise, high rise flats. So that's where we're beginning with. We're just really targeting those that are most at risk.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions and then I'll come to Councillor Brooks. Oh, is it on the fire doors? Sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Wynne. I just wanted to check with the medium-rise block. I know in the strategy it talks about it being a 3-year programme, and I wondered if we were prioritising those doors in the medium-rise blocks in Winnell. That was to replace all the fire doors across all council properties. Also, I wondered what the value of that door was, and you said the enhanced lease would be a saleable lease. The residents often in the flats are quite suspicious of change, and I wondered if there are any disadvantages of getting an updated lease, and if you could clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's benefits for both sides. For the council, it is having a consistent lease for all of our tenants in general, and that's something that we're rolling out on a longer project. But for the leaseholders themselves, some of our leases are really quite old, and it is around making it much more appealing to those that wish to buy their properties in the future. And that we provide a more modernised lease for them. So there will be a benefit to tenants, but I take your point. Of course, they will be suspicious, but they can take legal advice, and we would hope to be able to support them if there were costs associated with that. With regards to have we started a programme? Yes, we have. And we have started with all flats and masonettes for council tenants, and that's a 3-year programme, and I believe we're sort of halfway through that programme.
Councillor Brock.
Thank you. Just to bottom out this requirement to change the form of the lease as well. Paragraph 3.3 makes reference to, it's proposed that in return for this, that the leaseholders would agree to vary their lease. You made no reference to the conclusion that it is beneficial to them, and I wonder whether that can be added to the cabinet paper before it is submitted, because I think it would be useful to have a record of that, and not just in the minutes of this meeting. Are you prepared to change the door if they decline to vary their lease?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Do we have any further questions? If not, I have a few questions which I will come back to. I wanted to just quickly pick up on the one of the key outcomes around energy efficiency and ensuring that our homes are carbon neutral. So a couple of things here. Obviously, we have made provision of 15.7 million for retrofit, but if I've understood it correctly, we think that we're going to need to spend 75 million across our housing stock of 5,000 properties. Do we have any idea of how we're going to make up that difference? Or are we still waiting to see what the government comes up with that? Have I made myself clear, Gillies?
Yes. Sorry, yes. I'm not sure that we have any plans at the moment to make up the difference, but we haven't actually started the retrofit programme. We're due to start that soon, and we will be starting with voids and those that are most energy inefficient, and then we will have a better idea of costs and times and how that will affect the void process itself. So hopefully that's something we can come back to you once we've started the programme and have a bit more of an idea of costs and timescales, etc.
Councillor Lumley.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. Shall I just do them one at a time? That's probably easiest.
Yes, please.
The first relates to, we have a lot of emphasis here on older persons and providing for their needs. One of the needs for older persons often relates to bathrooms and being able to effectively get in and out of baths. Showers are often more suitable, or baths that are fully accessible. You talk here that you've done a lot of consultation in relation to older persons' needs. Can I draw one example to your attention? In West Meon, there is some older persons housing, some sheltered accommodation. There are, I think, 6 houses in all. They have really difficult bathrooms. There was a case of an old person who fell and was really quite seriously hurt getting out of the bath, which would have been avoided if they'd had a suitable, accessible thing there. The parish council asked that you go along and assess those 6, it may be 8, I apologise if I've underspoken, houses, and you refused to go and look. Are we really doing the right thing here, or could we possibly do better? Thank you, Chair.
I'm not sorry, I'm not aware of that case, Councillor Lumby. I am more than happy to look into that for you.
Thank you very much. I mean, the important point is actually more the one of the baths themselves and the policy that we have of not going for a wet room type approach. As I understand it, our policy is very much on you've had a bath since the board war, you can stick with that. And I think we should be moving forward. So the request, and thank you very much indeed, I'll send you the details, but the request is more generally, can we look again at the sort of bathroom provision we make and ensure that it is really suitable, it is achieving modern best practice, not perhaps going with something that we choose to go for because that's what we've got.
Yes, we are this year looking at reviewing our void standard, and Councillor Lerney and myself are going to visit some voids as they become available for us to have a look at the standard of voids. But it is something that we're hoping to review, and we wish to do that in partnership with TACT and involved tenants. So yes, that is certainly something in bathrooms and 20-year replacements of kitchens, etc., is all something that we wish to review and modernise our approach if able to afford to.
Councillor.
Yeah, as Mrs. Knight said, we are looking to review our relet standards. As Councillor Lumby said, traditionally we have, even when a shower has been installed for disability reasons, taken it out and put a bath back in, because that's how the property's meant to be. But certainly we need to revisit that. Modern wet rooms, particularly where they're disability friendly, are much safer for older people, but we do have to think about whether that's what they really want. Certainly my view is that we need to be thinking about having wet rooms in all of our older persons accommodation as standard rather than baths, but we do need to get the tenants to support us and get behind us if we're going to make that change.
Mr. Botham.
Sorry, probably just a supplementary to that, and I think that's an important piece of work that Councillor Lerney has just highlighted. I just wanted to make the point that we would never refuse to assess somebody who feels that they have a medical need for a different bathing facility. So if someone is reported to us as having a medical requirement, we arrange for an OT assessment, and if that OT assessment is recommending a wet room, we install a wet room. And so that's traditionally the policy is baths as standard, but we will always adapt a property to suit someone's medical needs based on the professional assessment of how much is OTs. So what we may have refused to do, we want to second guess the circumstances, but we may have said we're not going to review the policy based on 6 properties. But if there was a specific medical need, then we certainly would seek to get the advice from the professionals.
Sorry, Chair, could I just pick up on that? It finishes the point off. I think it would be useful if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So the specific request was that because these people tend to be very shy about coming forward, they're often not able to go online. They tend to just accept what's there. The parish council had requested a proactive rather than a reactive approach, which was to go to this simple terrace of houses, knock on the doors and say, is everything okay in your bathrooms? We didn't think that was a very unreasonable request, but apparently it was. So that's specifically what we would be knocked back on.
Chair, just as Mrs. Knight said, we can look at the specifics of that detail. We do have an in-house occupational therapist advisor as well, and I would have expected a positive response to that. So we'll look at the details.
Councillor Lumby, you said you had further questions. Do you want to?
Yes, if I may, although Councillor Brock will probably, for the sake of variety, give them a go and they come up to me.
Thank you, that's very kind. I just wanted to ask if you're going to be responding to that. Can we be copied so that I know the outcome? because I'd be quite interested to know how that problem was resolved. Thank you.
Happy to do that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Going on looking at the actual strategy itself, I have a number of questions. The first one was, if it's okay to raise on this now, the whole process and strategy for acquiring sites. And I know we talked about this before, but I have a real worry that because it's quite difficult to get sites, we just go for what is easily available. That doesn't necessarily reflect where the need lies. And we were told previously, difficult sites are therefore sort of pushed down the list, which means that often rural areas don't get the additional housing that they're after. And instead it's focused on where there can be easier wins. What is the strategy here? It's listed as the number one challenge. What is the strategy to address that? And because I thought that would be in here, what are we going to do? And are we committed to ensuring as far as possible that we acquire land and build houses where there is need, not just where we can get land?
I don't know if you could pick that one up for me, Richard.
I suppose the housing development strategy specifically highlighted the issue that the biggest challenge to our development is available land. I do get the point that Councillor Lambry is raising. I think we would look to exploit opportunities that they come up so few and far between. We would want to assess every opportunity we get in a positive way. And as far as where demand is, we have demand across the district. We have our biggest single demand is for people with a connection to the Winchester district, rather than any specific rural area. So we certainly wouldn't be excluding opportunities in rural areas on that basis. We would assess each site on its potential to generate a positive return. So it would need to pay for itself effectively through prudential borrowing and the rental stream that could be generated from that site. But any site that has the capacity for a good affordable housing development would be of interest to us across the district. I think if Councillor Learning has anything she would want to add.
Thank you. I would like to direct members' attention to page 43. I mean, it was interesting that Councillor Lumby referred to houses rather than homes, because when you look at our principal need, it is very much for one-bedroomed units, which are often quite difficult to provide in rural settings. We've had some resistance elsewhere to those smaller units with people wanting more traditional houses. And I think it's really important that communities do have a look at what the genuine need is in their areas, and ideally come to us if they can, to help us with that land provision, because we do recognise that that is our key challenge. But this assessment of need in terms of the demand for housing in the district is something that we're very cognizant of, and it certainly means that our focus going forward will be on providing not only properties where they're needed as much as we can given those land constraints, but also thinking about the size of properties that we need going forward. We also do need to look, and this and other strategies recognise at the appropriate different tenures that we can provide on different sites. The affordability will often depend on how much it costs us to develop, and that will affect the forms of tenure. But need is the basis of what we're doing, and we'll certainly be looking to satisfy that wherever possible. But it does have to be recognised that our ability to develop within the council limited, and we do need to focus on good opportunities rather than trying to build homes everywhere. I do apologise. I have had a negative COVID test today. It is just a bad cold. But of course, as soon as you start coughing and spluttering, everybody gets a bit worried. But I'm well away from everybody here.
Thank you, Councillor Loney. Councillor Bronco.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? Because 40% of our district falls within the South Downs National Park. Do we have the opportunity to liaise with them much in order to explain the nature of the demand that we have for land? Because Twyford falls wholly within the park. I noticed a previous report referred to a considerable need for one-bedroom properties. But Twyford's allocation from the South Downs National Park is simply for 20 houses, and to my knowledge there isn't provision for those primarily to be one bedroom, and therefore if that is replicated throughout the rural part of the district, then we're going to always struggle, as Councillor Lambie said, to provide homes for people that need, in the manner that they need them in our parts of our rural parts of our district.
Yes, and that's certainly true for young people starting out in life, where they only qualify for a one-bedroom flat. Even a young couple will only qualify for a one-bedroomed property, and it is important that we provide that starter home wherever we can. We do talk to the South Downs Park about opportunities. I have to say that hasn't been a very productive relationship so far, but we will keep seeking to improve the relationship wherever we can. We have offered to assist them in providing affordable housing within the district if we can, but as I say, those conversations haven't as yet come to anything.
Councillor Lambie,
yes, sorry, if it's okay. I noticed that in the challenges, it doesn't seem to come out very much in the strategy. We don't have any particular acknowledgement of the need to, when we're building houses, to create a sense of community and to have good open spaces with our communities. Indeed, it might be fair to say that our track record there isn't so good. We saw the option being lapsed on Badger Farm and the developers trying to buy out the open space there. I think, is that something that we can have in the strategy, a need of creating a sense of community, supporting community, providing open space for communities?
The strategy tends to... Sorry, I didn't...
Carry on, Gillian, and I'll take Councillor Loney afterwards.
That element of need is generally covered off in the development strategy, and will certainly be part of our review of the housing strategy. This strategy very much concentrates on our actual assets, but obviously part of our new development housing delivery programme is around building those greener spaces in, recognising some of the challenges that has been highlighted through COVID around people having open spaces, etc., to support their mental health, and also to encourage that community on our slightly larger estates, which I think you tend to get a much better sense of community within the rural areas and where parishes are supporting community. So we can certainly learn from that, but it's not a main objective of this strategy, but it is of course around our asset management objectives.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I do think this is a point that we can take up and incorporate within the strategy. We are trying to move the estate improvement programme much more to be around those community spaces, developing those, areas where community activities can take place. And I think we could be a bit more explicit about that, and about how important those open spaces are
to us and our communities. So we'll have a look at where we can incorporate that better. For members' information, Jeanette Palmer and I are meeting tomorrow to go over all of the suggestions that have been made today, and also deal with any minor amendments that members have already told us about. So we'll be having a look at that tomorrow, but we're very happy to look at incorporating that.
Councillor Lumley.
I'm going to rush for the line. I'm going to chuck them all in one big splurge. Nitrate mitigation, I see in Eastleigh, obviously the poster child for the administration, are buying up land for nitrate mitigation. Are we planning to do the same to assist ourselves? How do we need to have specific reference to climate change challenges that may arise? And finally, are we worried that demand levels actually might greatly increase beyond what we predict once we have the next influx of students, once Southampton University has built its new accommodation and more houses become HMOs and generally get handed over to that segment starting? That was all three mixed together.
Julie, would you like to kick off on that, and then I'll ask Councillor Lenny or Richard to fill in if there's anything you need.
Yes, I'm with response to the climate changes, and I think that is something that's quite clear within the asset management strategy of the work we're undertaking around that.
Responding to flooding things.
Yes.
That's right, rather than retrofitting.
So you're talking about adaptation rather than mitigation.
It's neat, exactly.
Perhaps we could come back to climate change in a minute. Could we deal with the nitrate mitigation question first? Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. Yes, we are looking at this, and we do have a project already on our own housing land in Mitchell Dever, which we're looking to complete, which will provide some nitrate credits. Our concern while we have actually been looking at acquiring land potentially for that purpose, and also for carbon credits, we are a bit cautious about going down that route, because there is a danger that if we buy land as nitrate mitigation and suddenly the government changes the goalposts and we don't need it anymore, then we've just got a very expensive piece of land on our hands. So any land we acquired for nitrate mitigation, we would need to also be getting more out of it than just those nitrate credits. Councillor Cutler, who's here, just throw him into the mix, has been involved in some of those conversations. So I don't know if he wants to add anything to that. You can say no.
I might. Yeah, I might say no. No, I mean, the nitrate situation is still going to be fluid, and buying credits might be a better option than actually buying the land and selling the credits. Therefore, we're working on a nitrate trading platform at the moment, and we need some clarity on that. I think the broader issue about sewage treatment and nitrates going into the system. I mean, I've always taken the view that this was a very short-term way of looking at nitrates, taking land out of production for mitigation, simply because, you know, there is now a review of waste permits, and that may change the situation. The danger with buying land and tying it up, even now, is that it has to be a 120-year agreement, and that in itself strikes me as a little bit of a nonsense, given we've just talked about climate change. and circumstances being so completely different over time. So it's a big commitment, and I think we need to just have a fairly cautious approach and see how the situation evolves. Obviously, we need to have enough to allow us to build, but going further than that might be rather a large risk.
Coming back to the other points, in terms of climate change mitigation and adaptation, we are considering issues around that. Clearly, it's something that we have to also think about in the development programme going forwards to make sure that we're building future climate change into those developments. And also looking at our older developments. So, for example, in Bishop's Waltham, where we've had flooding issues, while ideally the county council would be helping us out a bit more there, we are looking at what we can do on our own land in order to reduce the flooding risks in those areas, ideally in ways which will also improve the local environment, increase biodiversity and provide those nice community spaces which Councillor Lumbey was mentioning earlier. With reference to HMOs, clearly this is a housing revenue account strategy, so it's not dealing with the HMO issue. As a sideline, going back to that need for one-bedroomed homes, HMOs just aren't about students, they're also about young professionals and people who really can't find anywhere affordable elsewhere to live. So we do need to think again about those smaller units, not just within the HRA, but externally. With regard to the University of Southampton, we have a commitment from them that any increase in students will be matched by an increase in dedicated student accommodation as needed, and we have also committed to work with them to make sure that happens. We can certainly put policy in place, and we'll be looking for any kind of planning applications coming forward to deal with those kind of issues, as well as just a building.
Thank you, Councillor Loney. Do I have questions of Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you, Chair, and it's nice to have a chance, Councillor Lumbey, to comment. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions on the disposal criteria, which we're asked to comment on. One of the criteria you put is carbon efficiency, and where we're not able to bring the property up to a suitable standard. I just wanted to question whether or not, if we dispose of a property and we're not prepared to put the investment in, does that mean that someone will continue to live there in its past state in terms of carbon emittance that it's doing? And is that something that we should consider as a responsibility as the council? I also wanted to question an asset that's considered unsuitable for social housing doesn't fit the future needs of the organisation. Again, is one of the criteria. We've had a discussion a bit around the cost of land and the difficulty of finding land. And I wondered again whether we'd considered altering that slightly to say, and can't be changed. That property can't be changed or I don't know, redeveloped in a certain way, rather than it's just unsuitable for future needs. And again, there is that question mark around future needs. So I just wondered whether on those two things, what your thoughts were. Thank you.
Julie, do you want to kick off on that?
Yes, I mean, as I mentioned in the sort of introduction to the policy, sort of disposing of properties now that isn't a real driver for us. So we are certainly would want to be looking at being responsible and making sure, as you say, it's a very good point you say around, well, if it goes to the market, it's still also going to remain unsuitable. And we did recently do a kind of scenario with TACT and the tenant involvement group, and we presented such a case. So we presented a property that was a more of a not a kind of unusual property to have. Most of them had been sold, and this was one that was left, and we presented it to TACT and the involved tenants around, this is what it would cost to bring up to standard, this is what we could build if we sold it, two new houses. And it was interesting that all of the tenants voted to keep the property because it was family housing, and that they felt we should be providing the investment to bring that up to speed and to meet the carbon neutral objectives that we have within the asset management strategy. So it is something we deal with on a case-to-case basis. It had been in before the HRA cap was lifted. It was very much around those properties which were also expensive to maintain because they were perhaps the one left in a road because the rest of them had been bought, and those sort of reasons were some of the reasons that we were looking at disposing of properties. I'm not sure if Jeanette is there, I can't see or tell, but she might be able to bring a little bit more detail towards our reasoning and our process around the disposal criteria.
Thank you, Gilly. In terms of, yes, that scenario, we had that discussion, it was also related to rural housing as well, so there are a lot of criteria that go into that general debate. And it really is, it's a base, we have a discussion on all of the elements, if you like, in terms of, is it fit in its current form? Could it be changed? If it is changed, what are the costs? And then obviously the climate considerations, the demand considerations, how many people have we got on the waiting list? What do we know are likely to be trends for a future demand for that type of property in that type of area? What are the other options available from other providers? So all of that goes into that discussion, if you like, in terms of what's the best fit for that particular property at that time. Yeah, I don't know if that helps in answer that question, gives you the information, the detail you need. But in terms of actually looking whether it can be changed, yes, that is something we do look at, and it can be quite complex and involved, and it can then take quite a while to do that, to go through that process. But you're right in terms of whether that's clear from the way the criteria are laid out. It's something then obviously for us to have a discussion about tomorrow.
Councillor Isaac. Oh, sorry, Councillor Isaac. Councillor Loney wanted to come in, I think, there, and then I'll take your question. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can flesh this out a bit, because this is something which has the council has actually done ever since I joined the council 20 years ago, where odd properties, unusual properties have been sold off, particularly high value ones. For example, we still own some properties in the conservation area which are worth in the region of £750,000, which would cost a lot of money to bring up to standard, but clearly we can build, you know, two, even three modern homes to that same standard, and the new occupier of a home of that kind of description would generally be able to afford to bring it up to standard. So there are those kind of financial considerations that come into play, and I think that's where a statement like the asset has a negative net present value doesn't really flesh it out in a way that people can understand what that means, which is essentially that we're going to need to spend more money on it than we're going to get back again when we have a look at some of these. We've also sold unusual homes in the past, for example, going back to the suitability for social housing, where they've had very small bedroom sizes. As you know, we have, you know, minimum sizes that we expect for social homes, because we will put, you know, families in, and, you know, tiny bedrooms can be a real problem. We've sold off mazy houses where we might have 7 bedrooms, for example, but again, it comes back to that too small. We have had a look at, we do have some homes which we are looking to redevelop, coming back to those standards about retrofit, having a look at some of the modern building standards for homes in conservation areas. So we are looking at doing up a few flats in that sense. So it is something that we are considering, but I think Councillor Ferguson has a good point in that we might not be explaining what we're likely to be considering in this way. It's quite an easy set of boxes to tick, if you like, but it doesn't necessarily explain why we'd sell off homes. I have to say that it's always been unusual. You know, right to buy has been a much bigger issue around us reducing the number of homes in the housing revenue account. But we do need to think about what's practical for our tenants to live in, as well as what's financially sensible.
Thank you, Councillor Lurley. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Chair. This might not be the right time to ask it, but I was just wondering, in relation to, I keep harping on about market towns, but sorry, it's important to us. We're in a situation where we're not, over the 10 years, we've had about 13 new homes that the council only built within that time. And obviously during that time, we've lost some assets, as you say, the right to buy, etc. But we don't seem to be gaining any new ones. And we're now in a situation where, unlike the more rural villages, where if you live or work or have social contacts there, you get a higher priority so that you can stay in that town or village. Alresford doesn't have that because apparently we're above that criteria. So we're now in a situation where we've got people moving into the town. And I did raise this at the last meeting, and I was wondering whether you've got any more information on that. But you know, where people are coming into from elsewhere because it's a council house, it's suddenly come up and there you are, here it is. They're not used to Market Town, they don't like it, and they're on, I've got 5 trying to go back. And yet the people that do need and live and are looking for houses can't stay and remain where we are. And actually we need people to work and stay where we are. And it's becoming it's going to be a huge issue for our area if it's not addressed. And I'm just wondering, is this some of the work that you're looking at and how the council are going to manage that gap, unless we add in a criteria that if you live and work, or if you work where you want to live, you're somehow considered more than outside of an area where you're forced out and forced away from the work. Just wondering whether there is going to be any work done on that.
So, Julia, this sounds like a housing allocations question, perhaps more than an asset management question, but are you able to comment on that at the moment? You're muted, Julie.
Yeah, it kind of covers the new homes delivery programme and the allocation scheme at the same time. And it's I know the new homes are looking at demand, and obviously we try to match demand with where we can purchase land and build new properties. It's certainly something that I can take back to the new homes as a demand that's been raised. As regards to the scheme of allocation, I'm not aware that there is a local lettings plan in respect of Alresford, and so that's slightly difficult, a bit more difficult to explore. But I can certainly go back and look at housing need, and we can look at what the difficulties are in the Alresford area and see what we can do to help.
Thank you.
Right, I'm not seeing that answer. I did have another question around the challenges. On page 32, it talks about the tension between high quality, low carbon, and cost and financial viability. Are we looking and talking to utilities companies and other lenders about ways of approaching this that might allow us to, build into our schemes and develop our assets in a way that does future-proof them from both a carbon mitigation perspective and an adaptation perspective, that sort of allows us to internalise the potential costs of not doing anything that might arise in the future, you know, at the moment we seem to separate out, you know, the physical cost of retrofit or building carbon neutral homes, but the implications of not doing that might be higher operating or revenue costs over the life of building. And I just wondered if we're investigating or working with anybody to look at alternative ways of modelling this from a financial perspective and other ways of funding it that might build those costs avoided by taking a very proactive approach on climate change. Kelsey, I think it looks like we won.
I'm not aware of that.
Thank you. Thus far, when we've looked at the affordability of our new schemes, we have been able to build in that climate mitigation and adaptation within existing budgets. We do prefer, if we can, to keep things very simple for our tenants. And I think some of the schemes that I have looked at briefly around some of that, you know, where utility companies maybe forward fund some of these developments can get quite complicated. At the moment, we don't have any capacity to have a look at that. We're quite short of capacity in the new homes team, and generally, as you're aware, within the council, we have issues about the amount of work we've got on at the moment. Certainly we'd be interested in having a look at exemplars from other local authorities where they might have gone down this route, particularly if we've got the opportunity to talk to their tenants about how it's worked for them. So we'll certainly keep our eyes open, and if somebody wants to bring us something that somebody else has done, we'll definitely look at it. But I don't think we're in a situation to be pathfinders, if you like, at the moment.
Do I have any more questions? Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, just two quick ones. I noticed on page 36, the strategy talks about balancing the tension between under occupation and the demand for adaptations, which is something was touched on earlier. And I just wondered whether there was a specific strategy that we have to try and deal with that. 900 homes out of our housing stock is a significant number. So that was the first question. Do you want that first, and the second one comes after?
Let's take them both, Councillor Ferguson.
And then the second one was quicker. I was delighted to see in the strategy that we're investigating the need for housing for older folk with potentially mental health needs. I was really pleased to see that here. It's definitely something that where there's an under provision. And I just wondered what provision we currently have, which I'm not aware of. Thank you.
Julie, do you want, can you kick off there, and I'll go to colleagues if necessary.
Sorry, I was actually going to defer to Jeanette to see if she was able to help with some of those questions.
Thanks, Julie. In terms of the under occupation, we have the Wise Move scheme, which is an operation to encourage people to obviously move into smaller accommodation. I think that's our main drive. We have that scheme, and you're right, in terms of if you've got people who are able to access our disabled adaptations. I know in the past we have looked at our approach to adaptations to keep people in a home for which they are under occupying. I'm not too sure where we are currently with that particular scheme. Do you want to come in on that point?
Just on that point, Chair. So we did introduce disabled adaptation policy. It's been in operation for some years now, where we certainly don't seek to encourage under occupation through adapting a home where someone is significantly under occupying. We would always take an opportunity to try and then work around that situation. We wouldn't say that we would never adapt a property where someone's under occupying, but that's an opportunity really to address that issue. So we have a clear policy that adaptation would address that. Before that policy came in, then it just supported that process. We even were adapting properties, but where people were putting level access showers in where there were steps, for example. So they have to go up steps. So we changed the policy to make it a lot more coherent, effectively, to try and make sure that we're making the best use of stock by making sure people who have specific needs are either adapt property to suit that, or we move them to a more appropriate property. So we wouldn't necessarily just adapt. We'd always look to rationalise that at the same time on mental health issues.
And then in terms of the mental health issues, there's a new team and a fairly new lead to the authority who's got some skills around that. I think it's been appointed specifically on that issue to look. They did the scrutiny exercise round with the sheltered schemes and looking at addressing that ticker need from there. They did a toolkit. They looked at approach of other authorities and where gaps were and where those needs were. So they've got a new team, somebody with the skills as well to lead that team. So there's some provision there at the moment, but obviously part of the action coming out of this strategy will look to improve what's there already in terms of what the support is available. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if we have no further questions, I'll move into the debate, and I'll hear first of all from David and David from TACT, if you'd like to keep on that. Thank you.
On the question of Winnell, we fully support that because it will help the safety of our existing tenants in those 4 blocks, and should a fire happen, officers and fire brigade will know that all the doors are the same, so they haven't got to suddenly rush up to a flat that hasn't got a door that doesn't comply. I live in a block of flats, my front door has been changed, and I only wish it had been done 20 years ago. It's nice and warm, it fits, it's not drafty, it's perfect. So on that is on the fire. On the criteria for on the asset management, yes, I think we fully support it as it is. I don't think we all fully understand it. We've got a meeting later in the new year on this to help, but I think generally looking through the paper, it covers such a vast amount of information. It's a job to take it in one good hit. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, David. David Light.
On the question of selling houses that need doing up more, and would it be best to sell them? The scenario we had was if it's worth 500,000 and it costs 50,000 to do it up, and that's why we went to keep it. But I think if it's worth something like 700,000, it'd be worth to get rid of it, And also on the question of bathrooms, I think they need to be looked at not up to 30 years away, because I've been in my house for 25, 26 years, and my bathroom is still pretty scruffy, and it hasn't got any electric thing to take the steam ventilation. Yeah, that's the word, to take the steam out. And like Councillor Lumley said, is that we just put up with it sometimes and take time before we get anything done about it. But I will be getting in touch with the council on my behalf after Christmas to look at this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Do I have any comment from members? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. Yes, the bathroom point. Thank you again, Mr. Light, for affirming on that. I do think that it's something that we can be a lot more proactive, and we can do better on. and I would like to see that. And we do so much so well, but I think this is one area where we could improve. And I think we probably here, as a general principle, I don't see in the report very much about talking to members and consulting. And I think we perhaps talk about a lot about consulting, but perhaps we should actually be doing more to reach out and consult both with members and with tenants even more. So those are the two things I want to mention. But obviously, overall, it's a very good report, and thank you to Julie and her team for all their work.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. I think I would just like to concur. It seems to me that there is a general support for the proposal on the fire doors. I think some points have been raised to note on that, but I think that we all concur that that scheme works well. I think we've tested out the criteria for disposals and acquisition, and I think some useful observations there. But again, I think that although it's quite a technical point, the sort of negative NPV metric is probably the one that we should be going with. So I think that generally that's in line with what we're thinking. On the overall outcomes, again, I think we're hearing that it's driving in the right direction. I personally am concerned that we do keep up the momentum on both new build going to net zero carbon and not creating get outs there, and that we look, maybe not this year, but we build into our plan a way of really stepping up the retrofit and looking at how we can make our own retrofit programs maybe a platform for driving retrofit in the private sector across the district as well. And we need to build capacity in that area, both in terms of skills and business capacity to provide support for retrofit. It's going to be such an important part of our net zero carbon strategy that I think we should create our own quite sizable demand for that work as a platform for rolling it out elsewhere, and I think that's the point I've been making otherwise. We've looked at issues around the rural areas, and particularly how we provide or meet demand in the national park, which is obviously we do have a difficulty in that area, and something that I think we support continuing discussions with South Downs National Park on how we can meet that need for smaller dwellings there. We've talked a lot about wet rooms and meeting needs of older people on that side. And going right back to the beginning, just re-emphasising that point about building communities and ensuring that not only do we build the houses, but we've got the amenities around those homes, that they become homes for people in our area. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for the paper. I think it's been really informative and helpful in understanding where we're going with our HRA in the coming years. Thank you, Gilly, Jeanette, for your time this evening. Okay, our next item, item 7, is on the Winchester District High Streets Priority Plan. We have an update and progress report, and we're being asked to note the updates in the plan. And I think Sue Robbins is going to introduce this for us.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the slight delay there. Good evening, everybody. The report before you this evening is a progress report, an update on the Winchester District High Streets Priority Plan, the scope of which was to support businesses, to reopen and to innovate and to attract people back to our high streets to enjoy what they have to offer as a response to the COVID-19 measures and to help our economy respond. Back in June, you'll remember that the Policy Committee reviewed that draft plan as set out as a tactical plan. And at that time, there were some comments raised, and I'll take those. One of them was the use of Debenhams, and I can report that we are still in discussion about the future use of that building, but we have had agreement to put some displays in the windows, so that will improve the appearance and, as you enter into the high street, create a better visual impact. The role of the markets, the street markets, I should say, should be considered. And I can confirm that funding has been agreed with a contribution from Winchester Bid to look into to undertake some survey work, some assessment work, looking at the use, the locations and the form of those street markets, and that's across the district, and what their potential could be. Advertising and branding was also raised, and I do cover that in the report, and I at the time did mention that we do have a strong campaigns programme around attracting visitors and residents back into our high streets. And that the plan should have more focus on rural towns and market towns, and that has been added into the plan, which is in Appendix 1, and that gives more detail and flavour of the role these important centres play across our district. So tonight, the paper before you is a summary of the 6 months progress of the actions that we identified within the plan. There's a summary in section 3, but Appendix 2 gives more detail around the different activities that were in the plan. And I've broken those down into three main areas, which is business support, and that includes our work with Digital Islands, that was a bespoke service of assistance to our retailers and high street businesses, webinars, one-to-one mentoring and peer groups, but also the launch of our Shop Happy e-commerce platform, which has enabled independent retailers to come together and also benefit from a distribution through sort of collaborating and bringing together their supplies. On public realm, we have done some improvements to Busket Yard, we're calling it, which is the area down Busket Lane behind the bus station, and also in the square that you'll be aware of as well. For promotions and campaigns, we've issued new trails, we've done things like the Knitted King Alf, we've done staycations across the district, we have also run competitions where people could bring local produce, made in Winchester campaigns, so very much focusing on what the high streets and our businesses have to offer to attract people safely back into using our high streets. Much of this work has been supported through the funds that we were allocated under the Reopening High Street Safely and now the Welcome Back Fund from government. So we have been liaising with our Market Town colleagues on how that can be utilised across the district and with Winchester Bid with the projects in the city. So the next period until March, there is still much to do and still much we want to deliver. We want to continue the work on Busket Yard, but looking at how we can activate that space, and we're talking to various partners about what we could have there as an event or an activity to attract people to it. As mentioned, we're looking to dress the Debenhams windows. And we also have the festivals and street market research that we'll be undertaking, and we're currently out to procurement and seeking quotes for a potential for a lights festival in the city in February. And we are working on town maps and guides for each of the market towns and a joint combined guide for the district. Obviously, at the time of writing the plan, it was important to understand the impact and the benefit and the performance of the high streets, and so we do monitor a number of performance indicators, and they're set out in the plan. For footfall, we don't unfortunately have this, we only have this for the city, I'm afraid, and that is provided by Winchester Bid. But the table shows that footfall has significantly increased since the start of, over April last year. It is significantly increased, but has remained relatively steady until recently in October, when it was increased again. Vacancy rates, we know the national figure is 14.5%, but for Winchester City Centre in mid-October it was 10.3%. So we are performing better than the national high streets, but we're not at the pre-COVID levels that we were, which was at one point down to something like about 6.3%. So we're still slightly above that rate. Inevitably and sadly, we know that we've had some business closures across both the market towns and also in the city, but we have seen some openings too, which is very encouraging, and we know a few stores have actually moved premises within the city, so taking on better locations in some instances or larger space, which really shows that there's still a commitment to being in the city. Some other measures that we use also to gauge some performance is our city Wi-Fi and car park use. Wi-Fi has grown since April, but again has remained steady, and I think that probably tracks with the footfall rates that we've been seeing as well. And for car parking, bearing in mind some monthly fluctuations, it can be seen that levels are starting to return closer to the 2019 usage levels. It's perhaps a bit too soon to draw some really robust conclusions from that over just having 6 months of data, but I think you agree there are some positive trends there. And as indicated in the High Streets plan, we will be doing a full review of performance indicators in April 2022, and we'll have a full set of data from 2019 right the way through, and I think that will be able to give better trends as to performance. So that is a brief introduction to the report and a summary of the highlights that I wanted to raise your attention. And I ask that you note the High Streets plan that has been revised, the progress that we've been making in the first 2 quarters, and comment and to note and comment on the work programme that we have for the next 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Do I have questions to kick off? Councillor Isaacs.
Thank you, Chair. Right, so, now I'm going to focus on the market town bit, sorry. Just a query, presumably in your report, the measures will take into account all the things that other people within the market towns have been doing, like the councils and the Chamber of Commerce and everything. It's just a small part of that. But one of the things, I was meeting with New Ormsby Town Council today, and I said I would feed this back to the committee, and I believe that they're writing it generally. Their disappointment, the initial ideas that were great and we can help, and then nothing that they wanted is forthcoming, and trying to get money out of it at the end. It's been a huge delay and they've just given up with it. That's left them with a really sour mouth, taste in their mouth about this, because they wanted to do well, they wanted to do all these things, and it's just not happened. The Market Town booklet was brought up, and they thought that it would help bringing them out. I know the Chamber did one independently, and it was a good job because we still haven't got one, and that was supposed to be at the point of welcoming people back. One comment was made, we're more at risk of waving them off again than welcoming them back before we get a leaflet. So, I guess there's still more work to be done on that in that sense, because although the funding is there to support it, actually accessing the funding at the end has not been clear. The process of what you need for it to happen, the events have been gone and missed before we've even got an agreement that there's funding or how we access that funding. So it's just a question of measures really to feed that back, and that there's definitely more work that needs to be done sooner rather than later on, particularly on the booklet side of things. And I noticed, I thought it was a really good idea, the 5 things to do at a weekend. How are we feeding back into that? Because I think that's such a good idea. And you see them on Hampshire website, if you follow them and you get a notification, and it would be great if we could have something like that. I don't seem to see them for Winchester, so maybe that's a Facebook thing or whatever, I don't know. But it's something that we could feed back into, because there's lots of things happening. Particularly illumination trains and the arrival of Father Christmas, all these things that people are constantly asking, but it would be a nice little jog thing to feed into if you can let us know how we can feed that back. But just some things to think about on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We do recognise that it is a difficult process because of the funding regulations and requirements we have around it. So we tried our best to explain, but it is difficult. We have now appointed since September a welcome back officer to assist with all of that process. So Katie Mattingly, who I'm sure you know, has now been in post, and I hope that has resulted in a much better communication with you, and also trying to get some of this money out, because we want to get it out. It's just we have to be compliant with the regulations. So I know that that's caused some delays, but with her in post, I really do hope that we can deal with some of those issues and get moving on some of this for you. So, but I do take your point, it has been difficult. With the 5 things to do, that's run by our Visit Winchester campaign, so I can speak with Rachel Gander about that and make sure that there's some connection around that campaign that's going forward. Yeah, happy to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Crask.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of work gone into this material, for sure. I think what struck me, and is probably very much related on page 58, we talk about the challenge will be the ability to get it all done in the year. How confident are you about getting it all done in the year? Do you need, how big is the team? I just heard you talk about additional resource being added. Do you feel you need additional resource beyond that? Is the team big enough? Are we going to be able to get it all done?
The addition of the Welcome Back officer has added great capacity to us, and the focus on this programme for the High Streets plan has been very beneficial. We also have an officer within the economy team who is particularly tasked with taking forward a lot of the conversations and development work around some of these activities. So whilst we are not necessarily going to have everything completed, I'm confident that we will have made good progress on very close to all of the activity. We do have regular meetings, we programme it, we plan it. There is always more to do. There is always a new response, and just the announcements with the COVID variant at the moment, we need to perhaps respond to that and think about what support's needed or could be needed in the new year. So there is always more to do, but we recognise the importance of this, and we are deploying what resources we have with the funding that we have to it. Part of this review is to think about where we are achieving things and where there are gaps, so that helps us, and some of your feedback on the programme going forward would be helpful as a committee. But yeah, this is, and we do see the need for this to continue into next year as well. So it could be that there's a continuation of the tactical plan for a little bit longer. I don't think March is going to see the end of this type of activity.
Thank you. I think building on from that, there's always going to be more to do, and it's a never-ending task. So I guess the question of how are we going to know if we're successful? We've got metrics around the city centre Wi-Fi use and car parking use, so that might give us some indicator. Within the performance panel of the scrutiny committee, we do have KPIs which speak to visitor stay length increasing, visitor spend increasing, value of tourism to the economy increasing. We don't have, I guess, so much a target within those metrics. It speaks to trend data for monitoring only. Just wondering if there's a thought about what are we hoping to achieve, and is there a target where we can go, yes, we did it? Some thoughts on that being helpful.
I don't think we've got an absolute end goal of everything's solved, and these are the conditions that we've been able to create. So I think it is about monitoring the trends. We get useful data from Winchester Bid and their business barometer, where they look at do survey work with businesses, and they talk about confidence, sales. So there's more in-depth material that we can look at about how successful our businesses are being, which can be then mirrored with how much spend is actually coming into the economy. So I think we don't have necessarily an absolute end state for this tactical plan, but through those measures we can see that we are moving back to perhaps the level of performance we were pre-COVID, which is really the objective of this sort of tactical plan.
Councillor Cook and then Councillor Franks. Brock, so.
Thank you. It often happens, not to worry. The page 54 makes reference to one of the measures being car park use. Wickham fell catastrophically in September of 21. So, I mean, have you had an opportunity to look to see what happened there and whether there was anything that was intended and wasn't done, or anything that can help them recover? Because that, as I say, that's a huge drop in comparison to almost any other occasion. And then the other question I had, I was talking to family members to say, have you noticed, or are you aware of Busket Yard and what do you think of it? And my wife looked into Google to find out where it was, Busket Lane. There's no sort of Google event, indicator or anything to say why you might want to go there or what it is. So that might be something that we, need to look at, as to how do we make public aware, and have you got any measures or any indication that many people are aware and how they were made aware?
Thank you. The reasons for the car parking changes, I don't have the detail on that. I will follow up with Wickham to see whether there was some reason behind that. That's a good thing to follow up and understand what the data is saying. So yes, we'll do that. And with regard to Busket Yard, that is a new space. We are looking at bringing this forward as part of the link to sort of Friarsgate and on, and creating more of a link from Broadway. So it's new, and I suppose we're calling it Busket Yard because it's off Busket Lane. So the next phase of work is about actually bringing some events to there so that we can attract people to it, know that it's there. It's about animating the space because it is obviously just at the moment dressed. We need to actually use it for events and create that social space. That's the next piece of work.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I do have a few questions, but I will. Oh, it is Councillor Ferguson. You specifically called.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lovely. Thank you for the report, Susan, and it's great to see that you have indeed made some progress. There's quite a few things in the original tactical plan that you can tick off. I had a question around Busket Yard again. I know you're saying the next plan is to animate that space. I wondered if you were going to attempt to link that into the possible light event that's happening in February. I was on the High Street at the weekend and it was crammed. You couldn't move. It felt like Oxford Street. And it would have been great if we could have got some of those people to spill into a different area. Particularly with the market back in situ on the High Street. Originally in the plan there's some talk about curating the High Street, trying to look at the mix of businesses, trying to sort of look at what's where. I know there's been a bit of a change at the lower end of the High Street with a couple of food outlets opening, which are perhaps a bit brighter, a bit more garish than residents of Winchester are used to. Doesn't mean they're bad. Maybe means they appeal to a different audience. But I just wondered whether in the plan I haven't spotted that, but that curation of what goes where is still part of it. And also with the market strategy, there was a fledgling food market. I haven't seen that recently. I don't know whether that's been dropped and whether that's something that you're still looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. With regard to the spaces that could be included within the Lights Festival, yes, we're looking at various locations that could be sort of anchor points. So you start one place and then you get drawn to another. So we move people around the area. So yes, that can be included. With regard to the curation, that was thinking about festivals and the street market and how the curation of those can fit with the mix of businesses that we have. It wasn't necessarily thinking about how we might be able to direct different businesses into different locations. That's very much a planning and we don't have a lot of control or levers over that. But certainly we wanted to look and understand how our festivals might be better curated to fit and seek a better opportunity from maximising how our businesses link into those festivals. And then with the street market are the same, you know, what sort of activities do we have, including a food or others that we could develop so that we have a more distinctive offer for our street markets as well.
Councillor Lumpen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. A few things. First of all, it's more of a general request, one that I know Mr. Botham will have heard before. When we provide updates of plans, can we please provide comparison versions so we can see what the changes are? There seems to be within Winchester this reluctance to do so. I think it may be because I keep asking him, and well, it obviously annoys him, so let's keep going with that policy. It's working, that's good. But can we please do that? Just one, nice. Can I start with shop B? It's great idea. And I remember talking to Councillor Ferguson about it when she was sitting in the Hobseys. It seems very invisible. Talking to businesses and the Birmingham people, it doesn't seem to really have broken through. There seems to be a view that they will have their year that we paid for and then it will probably fade away because businesses won't want to pay for it. What's the feeling on it? What's the performance? How well is it doing? Out in the countryside, I'm not aware of anyone being aware of its use whatsoever. It's probably even a better kept secret with Basket Yard. So that was the first thing. Do you want to answer that one and then we'll go?
I'll have to speak to the team. We do a lot of marketing and promotion around it. If it's the message isn't getting out, then we need to have a look at that, and I'll take that back and review. With regards to its longevity, it's very much the opportunity to prove the case that it is worth being on. So you're right, that it has to have that reach and presence. So we have a year to do that in and make that case. With regard to the sort of cost of it, I think that's for businesses to decide that they find value from it, and that's, as I say, what we have to develop over the coming year.
Thank you. So we currently have, I have heard the radio advert for Winchester. I would like to ask how much that cost. Obviously, the street market is incredibly successful and brings a lot of people in from all over the country. What is the reach of the advertising locally, and how successful is it being? What does it cost? And also, that bloke singing at the end is really annoying, but that's just my own personal view. I'm probably too old or too young for it.
I don't have that level of detail available to me tonight. I'll have to provide that following the meeting.
Next, can I ask? No, it's not. Sorry. Can I ask you? Do you feel the plan is ambitious enough? Are there things that, with more resource and with more money, that you feel could be done better, or are you happy with it as drawn?
I think it is a plan that responds to the issues around supporting our businesses to recover and reopen and innovate and attract people back. I think our businesses are extremely busy in actually doing their business, and I think there's a balance to be struck about us placing too many demands on them or making too many asks of them. So I think there is a balance between our desire and all of our capacity to support this recovery and the changes that are needed. So I think it is a tactical plan. It's not about a sort of a forward strategy and a change. This is about what we believe needs to be done with our businesses and in our high streets at this time.
Okay, so as a last question, as we have already started removing tenants from King's Walk, as we know, and if well, we're starting demolition, I think is due to start soon. Kelsey, is it due to start soon, the demolition?
This is Councillor Todd's paper, so I wasn't quite prepared for questions.
Sorry,
Are we demolishing what?
You're starting the demolition of parts of CWR quite soon.
Well, we've started consultation on the demolition and creation of a park at the Friarsgate Medical Centre. Planning has proved to be much more complicated than we thought, which just shows that the Chinese walls that we hear about are very genuine. We can't even tell our own planners what to do. So that will go to planning after Christmas, and then we're hoping a couple of months after that we'll be ready to go. Yeah, and that will link into Busket Yard, as was mentioned earlier, and that will really transform the space once that's in place. I have been asked to keep the brambles though.
Okay, thank you for that. That leads me neatly on. Thank you. Are we concerned that actually once work does start, that will actually again be pushing people off coming into Winchester? We've already seen some of the queues with the Vortex sites, and one lorry causes traffic all the way back to the leisure centre. And a lot of our public realm is quite shoddy. I know we sort of big it up in here, but we have the travels mentioned. Actually, some of the pavements and some of the sort of general rubbiness about the place, the sort of shabby Winchester appearance. Is all of that such a challenge that we actually really need to be raising our game before it's too late? Thank you.
I can take some of that in the fact that we are with the town forum got a meeting coming up to talk about the quality of the public realm and its maintenance and management. I think that's been raised at this committee previously, so there's members and officers coming together to talk about that and how we can better address some of those concerns. I think some of that longer term work with the impacts of King's Walk is something we'll have to look at as a wider team. It's not within the scope of this individual plan. I think that's part of cross team working and the economy team being part of the conversations around those plans.
Thank you, Chair. So just another question about the shop mapping. Certainly in our market area, and most people are aware of it, we've promoted it and shouted about it enough times. It's just not proved very popular when they've looked into it for what it's done. I think at the start of the original first lockdown, there were an awful lot of businesses that were not online and could have done with this sort of thing. But by the time this has come out, I think most people have got their own process got sorted and are doing quite well with their own situation. I mean, to be honest, the card shop, for instance, I think it saved them going online, really did. And they're very happy with how it's progressed. So when people have asked for feedback on that and said, have you had a look into it, they just don't think that it's for them. It's just not a right foot on the market towns at the moment for that sort of thing, from what they're already offering and doing. They'd rather people come here, but obviously that's just the feedback. It's just not something that's proved very popular from that side of things. It's not that they don't know about it, it's just or just not taking it up. No other reason than that, I think.
Thank you, Councillor. Feedback like that is also very useful for us when we're looking at how we can either change the programme or do something different with it. It might not be for everybody. We certainly don't want to replace what businesses are doing, and if they're working effectively, then that's great news. I'm really pleased to hear that. This was very much about filling a gap. It is about where something else isn't happening or isn't working, what can we do to assist? So it might be for those businesses that haven't been able to respond and adapt like the ones we've been talking about, but it's useful to know that sort of insight. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I've not seen more questions. Have we got any debate on this particular debate? If not, I would just like to thank you, and I think the impression I'm getting is that we have seen a strong, positive return in Winchester, and I'm sure that it does reflect the work that has gone in to make that happen, and through plans like the priority plan. So I think that the team has been congratulated on the support that they've provided there, and obviously we welcome the extra resource that you've got, particularly in supporting the market towns. I think my personal experience of a number of things. One successful area, the tree trail. It has got a good word of mouth following. I think there's a lot we could be doing with those, but some really interesting innovations there that have been picked up locally and welcome. And I think because people are inclined to get out and walk around Winchester, things to do while they're walking around have been really valued. I think there's an interesting tension around and a public perception about the resilience. I think resilience is the critical word. Public perception of resilience perhaps isn't the same as ours. We can compare ourselves with other areas and see, how much better Winchester is doing. But there is this debate around whether our independents are being supported sufficiently, and whether the vacant properties are being taken over by chains who can outcompete them. I think there are myths and realities in there, but we need to have a strong response there. And you're talking about curation. I think, as others have emphasised, just demonstrating the impact of our curation and how that has sustained our brand is very important to get across. Otherwise, I think it has been a useful plan. Acknowledge that it is time limited, and that longer term it's projects like CWR, others that are going to be transformative for the city and for the district more generally. Thank you. Councillor Lumley, you've decided you want debate.
Sorry, yes.
This is debate, yeah.
This is debate, thank you. Sorry, Chair. I am really worried about the markets towns share. Councillor Isaacs talked about some of the support and some of the issues. I personally found the section on the market towns, lots of words, some of it or most of it historic or descriptive, not actually active. And I think we have some real challenges in the city as well. Yes, some good things are going on, and we have a good brand, but we really need to be doing a lot to be protecting that. I think we need to be more ambitious, and we need to be more positive. I think that, and there is no disrespect to Sue and the team, I think they work incredibly hard, and I'm hugely grateful for all they do. But I think that with such a lot for them to cover, there isn't the time to give it the proper focus to really raise our game. And I think as we recover from COVID, as we look to move forward to the next stage, and we look to reinvent the high street, we really need to be thinking about this very, very hard, and I think that it's incumbent on us to really raise the game. So much of this in this plan has already happened, or it is historic. There's not much going forward, and we really need to be thinking about the tactics to the strategy and how we're going to go out and do that. So that's my concern, that we shouldn't be lulled into thinking that this is fine. We are in real danger, and we need to be thinking very hard about the actions, putting the resource in 2 days, both that thinking and then the subsequent acting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue. I did actually just mean to say it would be useful if we could have perhaps at our March meeting an update on the shop API, just a review, and on the digital islands. Perhaps we could just have a report back on the progress there, because the data wasn't available for this report. Thank you. Right. The next item is report back on the Digital Winchester Task and Finish Group, which has been delegated to me as the chair and last surviving member, I think, of the Task and Finish Group. So as part of the work programme, we're going to host an open conversation to discuss 4 key topic themes on infrastructure, access, opportunity and future potential. And this took place on the 23rd of November last week. It was a 90-minute session chaired by Gavin McWhirter of Digital Islands, and it attracted a wide-ranging audience of over 60 contributors and participants. We had a number of subject specialists, among them BT Openreach, Hampshire Superfast Broadband, Geekabit, Community First, the Federation of Small Businesses and the University of Winchester. The session covered multiple challenges, a lot of questions around what the hard infrastructure needs to look like. Is it about fibre, Wi-Fi, mobile communications, or a mix, and what that balance should look like? We looked over the horizon to near-term opportunities and how it might play out for the longer term for the local economies. We discussed the implications for jobs and how people worked, and looked at the future potential, particularly around healthcare, social care, education and learning. And above all, I think we spent a lot of time talking about the question of access and inclusivity, which is an issue for us all, and covered opportunities to build skills that digital connectivity can bring about. We had a few polls taken, and the event has been recorded, and a summary of the discussions will be put up on the Digital Winchester pages on the City Council website. As far as the Task and Finish Group is concerned, continue to collect intelligence from the ongoing residents survey, and much of the opinion shared in the polls and chat section of the virtual meeting will add to those findings. Expert evidence is also being collated, and all of this will be brought together in findings to inform future thinking, along with providing a tool to help influence future decisions and priorities. There are a range of outcomes from the conversation, particularly that reliable connectivity is important to people in their daily lives, and that clearly the digital change will have a major impact on growth locally. Digital is a key aspect in what's been called the 5th Industrial Revolution. I think it's a bit of debate as to what that is. Some think it's really driving at the circular economy, but certainly all these changes are underpinned by a growing digital capability. We acknowledge that there is a digital divide, particularly across Winchester District, and there are still a significant proportion of our residents are digitally isolated. So there's a lot of work still to be done to be clear about what our end goal looks like for the next 5 to 10 years. Consumers are now shopping online more, but the presence of the high street is still important, and they use digital access to inform their activities when they come to the high street. The small Federation of Small Businesses reported that 26% of business owners felt their digital skills, the limitations of their digital skills, held back the development of their businesses. And the LEC pointed out that there are still substantial areas that lack adequate connectivity, and compared with competitor countries and areas, this is going to become critical for us. We touched on areas where investment is coming, and clearly there's a lot more that needs to be done, and I think this is an important conversation for Winchester District to continue to be actively engaged in, and I look forward to seeing the further report back from the group coming to the next meeting. I think a number of us were present. I think Councillor Lumbey was there, and one or two others. I don't know if you've got any remarks. I thought it was a lively and useful conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, it was very interesting. I mean, there was a telling point early on, but of course the people who probably are most challenged on the digital front across Winchester District won't be on that call because they couldn't get on the call, which was sort of ironic, but also telling. I think, Jay, you summarised the various discussions very well. I think there was a real feeling that, in particular, rural areas, a lot of those had major issues with lack of effective, sufficient broadband, and lack of mobile too. I saw there was a headline today that a mobile phone mast had disappeared and caused problems, and it's amazing how much we're reliant on these things and miss them when they're gone. So that was really, really important. I suppose the only thing I was sort of wondering about was where this is all going to go and what we were going to do with this information, and perhaps that's something that the group, which I think is just you, isn't it? We'll come back with some thoughts, but I think there was a feeling from various places. You know, here's the picture. We know where it is. What are we going to do with it? And the sort of the what and the how and the when was interesting. So that's something you may want to think about. But that was an interesting 90 minutes. It was a shame that there weren't even more people there.
Thank you, Councillor Lumbey. Yeah. Councillor Brooke.
Thank you. I'd like to endorse part of that. I wasn't able to join, I'm sorry. But I did see some statistics circulated that a certain number of people, whatever percentage it was, were very satisfied with their broadband speeds, and the concerns were about reliability. But being in a rural area where the parish, well, just 5 miles from Winchester, so we're in the wilds without decent mobile services. My wife did copy peel and had to go to another village to upload all the card payments made into the device because they can't be transmitted from our house. So we don't have good broadband or mobile phones. The parish council has supported as a sponsor the application for faster broadband, fibre to the premises, and we secured people's promised vouchers sufficient to pay for the scheme, and that application was made some 6 months ago, and we're still waiting to find out when the contract might be put in place. So there are lots of promises to the rural areas, and lots of talk about digital connectivity, and reference was made to the digital divide. But it would be interesting if we could see some sort of statistics about just how wide the shortfalls are, and so that we can actually try to look to help some of those communities, enable people to work from home effectively, because it's all very well supporting the centre of Winchester, but there are a lot of people who need these sort of services in the rural areas, are doing what they can, but the institutions are not utilising the requests or acting on the requests to deliver some of this infrastructure. And I filled in the survey for residents or whatever a long time ago, and I was quite put off by the nature of the questions, because they didn't seem to be asking what your current circumstances are. Just sort of, would you like better broadband? Do you need better broadband? But not how bad is your current broadband, speed or service or whatever. So a bit more detail in order to be able to focus the efforts more effectively, I think would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Perhaps you'd like to join me on the task initiative to ensure that we can get this viewpoint across.
It would church me to say no. Home put so much effort in to try and get better connections where I would be very happy to help.
Thank you. We will certainly have you as a consulting member. That would be very useful. Right. So that brings me to the last item on the agenda, which is the committee work programme for the remainder of the year. So I'm looking at page 81. Our next meeting, we will have a further update on this project and on the digital economy. We will have a paper on the housing strategy, the new homes plan, and a discussion on a task group to look at housing tenures and that housing needs of residents over the lifetime. We will be looking at a committee resolution, a proposal to be brought forward for a revised business case for a special vehicle to manage sub-market rented housing in Wynn. So that's coming to the next meeting. Are we all happy with that? Any other comments on the programme? Okay, otherwise I think that brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Thank you very much, and I will close the meeting.